3 years ago, I brought you the Sundown series. Last year, I brought you the Black Massacre series. Well, this year, in 2024, I am bringing you a brand new series, one that will definitely lift your spirits, especially the fighting spirit. And I'm calling it the We Fought Back series, where in this series, we will discuss the various slave rebellions that occurred specifically in what is and what became the United States, or simply just in North America. And today, I'm going to kick it off with the prologue. Numerous slave rebellions and insurrections took place in North America during the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. There is documentary evidence of more than 250 uprisings or attempted uprisings involving 10 or more slaves. One of the first was San Miguel de Guadalupe, the first European settlement in what would become the United States. Three of the best known in the United States during the 19th century are the revolts by Gabriel Prosser in Virginia in 1800, Denmark Vesey in Charleston, South Carolina in 1822, and Nat Turner's slave rebellion in Southampton County, Virginia in 1831. Drapetomania was a supposed mental illness invented by American physician Samuel A. Cartwright in 1851 that allegedly caused black slaves to run away. Today, drapetomania is considered an example of pseudoscience and part of edifice of scientific racism. Slave resistance in the antebellum South did not gain the attention of academic historians until the 1940s, when historian Herbert Aptheker started publishing the serious scholarly work on the subject. Herbert stressed how rebellions were rooted in the exploitative conditions of the Southern slave system. He traversed libraries and archives throughout the South, managing to uncover roughly 250 similar instances. The 1811 German Coast Uprising, which took place in rural southeast Louisiana, at that time the territory of Orleans, early in 1811, involved up to 500 insurgent slaves. It was suppressed by local militias and a detachment of the United States Army. In retaliation for the deaths of 2 white men and the destruction of property, the authorities killed at least 40 black men in a violent confrontation. The numbers cited are inconsistent. At least 29 more were executed, combined figures from 2 jurisdictions, St. Charles Parish and Orleans Parish. There was a third jurisdiction for a tribunal in what amounted to summary judgments against the accused, St. John the Baptist Parish. Fewer than 20 men are said to have escaped. Some of those were later caught and killed on their way to freedom. Although only involving about 70 slaves and free blacks, Turner's 1831 rebellion is considered to be a significant event in American history. The rebellion caused the slave-holding South to go into a panic. 55 men, women, and children were killed, and enslaved blacks were freed on multiple plantations in Southampton County, Virginia, as Turner and his fellow rebels attacked the white institution of plantation slavery. Turner and the rebels were eventually stopped by state militias. The rebellion resulted in the hanging of about 56 slaves, including Nat Turner himself. Up to 200 blacks were killed during the hysteria which followed, few of whom likely had anything to do with the uprising. Fears afterwards led to new legislation passed by southern states prohibiting the movement, assembly, and education of slaves and reducing the rights of free people of color. In addition, the Virginia legislature considered abolishing slavery to prevent further rebellions. In a close vote, however, the state decided to keep slaves. The abolitionist John Brown had already fought against pro-slavery forces in Bleeding, Kansas for several years when he decided to lead a raid on a federal arsenal in Harpers Ferry, Virginia. This raid was a joint attack by freed blacks and white men who had corresponded with slaves on plantations in order to create a general uprising among slaves. Brown carried hundreds of copies of the Constitution for a new republic of former slaves in the Appalachians, but they were never distributed. And the slave uprisings that were to have helped Brown did not happen. Some believe that he knew the raid was doomed but went ahead anyway. Because of the support for abolition it would and did generate. The U.S. military led by Lieutenant Colonel Robert E. Lee easily overwhelmed Brown's forces, but directly following this, slave disobedience and the number of runaways increased markedly in Virginia. The historian Stephen Hahn proposes that the self-organized involvement of slaves in the Union Army during the American Civil War composed a slave rebellion that dwarfed all others. Similarly, tens of thousands of slaves joined British forces or escaped to British lines during the American Revolution, sometimes using the disruption of war to gain freedom. For instance, when the British evacuated from Charleston and Savannah, they took 10,000 freed slaves with them. They also evacuated slaves from New York, taking more than 3,000 for resettlement to Nova Scotia, where they were recorded as black loyalists and given land grants. This is going to conclude the prologue of the We Fought Back series. Be sure to tune in next week when we officially get started with this series with episode 1, the official episode 1 of this series. Be safe and be one.